The boardroom went quiet in the exact way a room goes quiet when everyone realizes they are watching a man get erased. I was standing beside the main display, clicker still in my hand. Halfway through the presentation, I had spent 3 years building my life around. Behind me were the results, the stability curves, the delivery models, the one breakthrough that could have kept Ellis Biovance alive for another decade. Then Blair Ellis walked in. She wore a white suit sharp enough to look surgical, with her father's confidence and none of the scars it takes to earn it. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Evan," she said. She wasn't sorry. Graham Ellis, our CEO, didn't look surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. Not Blair's timing, not the way the investors turned toward her, like I had stopped existing. Graham already knew. Blair moved to the front of the room and tapped a key on the conference laptop. My slides disappeared. 3 years of my work vanished from the screen, like they had never been there. "My father asked me to share an updated direction," she said, smiling at the investors. "One with stronger commercial potential." Then her deck opened, and there it was. My compound stabilization model, my delivery sequence, my notes, cleaned up and dressed in expensive fonts, concepts I had written in my private notebook, details I had only discussed late at night in the lab when Blair stood beside my workstation, pretending she wanted to learn. As she passed me, she leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "We don't need your ideas anymore." Something inside me went cold. She presented my work as hers. The investors nodded. Marcus Harlan, the lead investor, actually smiled. "This is exactly the direction we were hoping for," he said. I closed my laptop slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I took my keycard from my wallet and placed it on the table beside Blair's printed deck. "Graham finally looked at me," I said. "Good luck reproducing it." Then I walked out. My hands didn't start shaking until I reached my car. I had 48 hours before they realized what they didn't have. My name is Evan Ward, and nothing about me looked like the kind of man investors trusted with medical revolutions. I didn't come from money. I didn't have a father on a board, or a last name people recognized at industry conferences. My mother cleaned medical offices at night in Dayton, Ohio. And sometimes I did homework in waiting rooms while she emptied trash cans and scrubbed floors around exam tables. I got through college on scholarships, warehouse shifts, and whatever lab assistant work nobody else wanted. I repaired equipment, washed glassware, ran overnight trials, and watched professors put their names first on findings I had helped build. So when Graham Ellis hired me 4 years ago and said, "Fresh eyes create breakthroughs," I believed him. For 3 years, I gave Ellis Biovance 16 hours a day. I built a stabilization process for volatile compounds that could change targeted drug delivery, especially for cancer treatment. It wasn't just research to me. It was proof that I belonged in rooms where men like Graham usually only let people like me serve coffee. Then Blair arrived. Graham introduced her as our new strategic innovation director, fresh from some European business program, with a title nobody could define. She asked questions. She smiled. She borrowed my notebooks. Once, she told me, "You're brilliant, Evan, but you don't understand how this industry actually works." I thought it was advice. It was a warning. I drove home without turning on the radio the whole way back. My mind kept replaying the moment Blair minimized my slides. Not because it was dramatic, because it was casual, like deleting 3 years of my life was just another meeting room adjustment. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building with bad plumbing, and a view of the alley behind a grocery store. Atlas, my old shepherd mix, lifted his head from the rug when I walked in. He came over slowly, pressing his gray muzzle against my leg like he knew better than to make noise. I stood there for a long time with my hand on his head. Blair hadn't just stolen a presentation. She had stolen the future I had built one sleepless night at a time. My phone buzzed. "Maya Chen, what happened? Everyone's talking. Are you okay?" Before I could answer, another message came in. "Graham Ellis, we need to talk, now." I stared at both messages until the screen went dark. Then I turned the phone off. I opened my laptop, pulled up the encrypted folder my attorney had told me to maintain, and checked every timestamp, every equipment receipt, every independent test result. Northline Therapeutics had been registered 3 weeks ago. I hadn't planned revenge. I had planned survival, and Graham had, at most, 48 hours before he understood the difference. The next morning, I walked back into Ellis Biovance, wearing the same navy jacket I had worn to the investor meeting. People noticed. Conversations died as I crossed the lobby. A junior researcher looked at me, then looked away so fast it was almost funny by the time I reached the lab. The silence had started moving ahead of me like a weather front. Maya appeared beside my workstation before I finished opening my drawer. Evan, she whispered. Graham has been looking for you since 6 this morning. He's furious. What did you do? I placed my old coffee mug into my bag. Nothing he can prove. That is not comforting. Before I could answer, Graham's voice cut across the lab. Ward, my office. Now. Every eye followed me down the hall. Graham was standing behind his desk when I entered, red-faced, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like a man trying to look busy instead of desperate. Where is it? He demanded. I closed the door behind me. Where is what? Don't insult me. The core stabilization protocol. The investors arrive in less than an hour. And suddenly my lab can't reproduce your results. Your lab, I asked. His jaw tightened. I let the silence stretch, then said, according to yesterday's meeting, Blair developed a more innovative direction. My ideas aren't needed anymore. The door opened behind me. Blair rushed in, pale, under perfect makeup. Daddy. They still can't get the compound to hold. Then she saw me. What is he doing here collecting my things? I said, since you made my role unnecessary. Her eyes sharpened. You did something. I didn't remove anything from company systems. I didn't delete files. I didn't sabotage equipment. Then why won't it work? She snapped. I looked at her deck still sitting on Graham's desk. Maybe because science requires understanding, not slides and buzzwords. Graham stepped forward. Fix it. We'll discuss compensation, title, equity, whatever you want. No, the word landed harder than I expected. I moved toward the door. Graham blocked it. I looked him in the eye. Are you detaining me, Graham? For 1 second, he looked like he might try. Then he stepped aside. This isn't over, he said. I walked past him. It was over when your daughter said you didn't need me. Do you want me to continue with part 5? Part 5. Marcus calls. I didn't leave the parking lot right away. I sat in my car with the engine off, watching the main entrance of Ellis Biovance through the windshield. 10 minutes later, Marcus Harlan arrived with 2 other investors. Expensive coats, confident steps, men who expected doors to open before they reached them. They had no idea they were walking into a fire. My phone rang 14 minutes after they entered. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. This time, I answered. Evan Ward. This is Marcus Harlan. His voice was controlled, but the control had cracks in it. I figured. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Coffee shop across the street. 5 minutes. He hung up before I could respond. I smiled at the dark screen. Right on schedule. When I walked into the coffee shop, Marcus was already in the back corner, tie loosened, one hand wrapped around a cup he hadn't touched. I ordered coffee first, took my time, let him watch me not hurry. What happened in there? He asked the second I sat down. You'll have to be more specific. Yesterday, Blair Ellis presented a breakthrough. Today, nobody in that building can make it work. That sounds like a serious operational issue. His eyes narrowed. $80 million is sitting on that table. Evan, none of us are funding smoke and mirrors. Then don't. He leaned back. What do you want to not work for people who steal from me? We can fix that. Triple your salary, equity, senior title, full credit. I took 1 sip of coffee and set the cup down. You're negotiating for the wrong company. For the first time, Marcus stopped talking. I slid a plain business card across the table. 1 number, nothing else. Call me at 3 if you want to see the version that actually works. Then I stood and left him staring at it. At 2:27 p.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera and saw Graham Ellis standing alone in the hallway of my building, looking painfully out of place under the flickering light. No assistant, no lawyer, no driver hovering behind him. He had come himself. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in right away. The investors walked out. He said, I heard. No, you didn't. His voice was lower now, stripped of the boardroom polish. You knew. I stepped aside. He entered my apartment, eyes moving over the cheap furniture, the stacked journals, Atlas watching him from beside my desk. Blair was overzealous, Graham said. She should have acknowledged your contribution. That's a polished way to describe stealing the entire process. His mouth tightened. Come back. Full credit. A better title. Equity. Name your terms. I looked at the man who had once told me I was the future of his company. Why would I trust you now? Because without you, we all lose. No, I said. Without me, you lose. The mask slipped then. Everything you developed belongs to Ellis Biovance. I didn't take anything that belongs to you. Then why can't we make it work? I opened the door. Because not everything can be stolen with a cleaner slide deck. For a second, he just stared at me. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen, and the color drained from his face. We're not finished, he said. I watched him leave. Then I locked the door and got ready for my 3 o'clock call. At exactly 3 o'clock, my phone rang. I answered on the first ring. Evan Ward. Marcus Harlan didn't waste time. I want to see what works. Then come alone. I'm not alone. I looked at the laptop open on my desk. Who's with you? The entire investment group. After what happened this morning, nobody is comfortable making decisions based on secondhand explanations. That was better than I had expected. Text me the address, I said. I'll bring the data and the samples. 2 hours later, I stood in a private conference room on the 32nd floor of a downtown office tower. 6 investors sat around a polished table. No Graham, no Blair, no one reaching over my shoulder to close my slides. For the first time in months, the room was mine. Before I connected my laptop, I set a folder in front of each investor. I want to make something clear before we begin, I said. What you're about to see belongs to me, not Graham Ellis's company. Marcus leaned forward. That is not what we were told yesterday. I imagine a lot of what you were told yesterday won't survive contact with documentation. No one interrupted after that. I began with the problem volatile compounds breaking down before reaching target tissue, then the failure rate in conventional delivery models, then the stabilization sequence I had developed, the timing mechanism, the activation trigger, and the data from independent trials. I didn't oversell it. Men like Marcus heard sales pitches all day. I gave them numbers, samples, timestamps, and silence. Then I ran the demonstration. The compound held. The degradation curve stayed flat. The delivery marker activated exactly where it was supposed to. One of the investors, Amara Voss, stood and leaned closer to the monitor. Run that again, she said. So I did. Same result. When I finished, the room stayed silent long enough for me to hear the ventilation humming above us. Marcus finally spoke. This is remarkable. It's reproducible, I said. That matters more. Amara looked up from the folder, and Ellis Biovance can't reproduce it because Blair presented the destination. She never understood the road. Marcus's expression hardened. Are you saying they stole this? I'm saying you need to decide whether you want to invest in a presentation or in the technology that actually works. Amara tapped the folder. Have you formed a company? Yes. When? 3 weeks ago. Marcus looked at me sharply. I held his gaze. Northline Therapeutics, I said. That's who you should be negotiating with. Amara didn't smile when she asked the next question. Mr. Ward, you were still employed by Ellis Biovance while developing this process. That creates legal risk. It would, I said, if I hadn't planned for that. I opened the second folder and slid copies across the table. The version Ellis has was developed on company time and remains in their systems. I didn't remove it. I didn't corrupt it. I didn't touch their servers. What they don't have is the refined stabilization sequence I developed independently after I realized my work was being harvested. Marcus scanned the first page. Independently how? Off hours, personal equipment, privately purchased compounds, separate lab space rented under my name, every test timestamped, every material receipt preserved, every notebook page photographed and notarized. Amara turned another page. You had counsel involved. 6 weeks ago. That changed the air in the room. I asked an IP attorney to review my employment contract. I continued. The assignment clause covers inventions created using Ellis resources or directly assigned company projects. The refinement pathway was neither. My attorney documented that before Northline was formed. One investor frowned, and Blair Ellis first pulled out 3 still images from security footage. Blair accessed my workstation after hours at 10:30 p.m. on 3 separate nights. I requested the footage after my original notebook disappeared. At the time, I told security I was tracking misplaced research notes. Marcus stared at the images. She stole from you, he said. She tried to. I corrected. She copied what she could read. She couldn't copy what she didn't understand. Amara looked at me carefully. You knew this confrontation was coming. I knew I was vulnerable, I said, so I protected myself. I closed the folder. I wasn't planning revenge. I was protecting my work. There's a difference. By the time I got back to my car, my phone was full of messages. Most were from Maya. Total chaos here. Graham just fired Owen for saying the protocol might be incomplete. Blair is blaming the equipment. Half the lab looks ready to quit. I read the message twice, then put the phone face down on the passenger seat. That was the thing about weak systems. They didn't collapse when someone attacked them. They collapsed when the pressure revealed what had always been hollow. Ellis Biovance had money, glass walls, polished branding, and Graham's name on the building, but it didn't have the one thing it needed that morning, understanding. An hour later, Marcus called. Graham has called me 9 times, he said. He's claiming you stole company research. That sounds like projection. He's threatening litigation. I expected that. You're calm for someone being accused of theft. I kept receipts. There was a pause. Then Marcus said, We're pausing all discussions with Ellis Biovance. I looked through the windshield at the city moving around me, like nothing historic had happened. But it had. Inside Graham's company, Fear was spreading faster than any failed compound ever could. Blair had sold them certainty. Graham had sold them control. Now they had neither. I met Maya that night at a small Thai restaurant, 3 neighborhoods away from the research park. She looked exhausted when she slid into the booth across from me. No lab coat, no badge, just a gray sweater, tired eyes, and the expression of someone who had watched a building catch fire from the inside. "I've never seen Graham like that," she said. He threw a chair into his office window. "Anyone hurt?" "Only his reputation." She rubbed both hands over her face. 3 senior researchers resigned before lunch. Owen is talking to an attorney. Blair locked herself in a conference room and refused to come out. I didn't smile. Maya studied me. "You knew this would happen. I knew what motivated them, meaning Graham wants control. Blair wants approval without earning it. Marcus wants return without risk." I paused, and I wanted my name on the work I built. Her face softened, but she didn't pity me. That was why I trusted her. "You started your own company," she said, 3 weeks ago, before the presentation, before the execution." She sat back, absorbing that. Then she asked quietly, "Is there room for another scientist?" For the first time all day, I felt something close to relief. "I was hoping you'd ask." The next morning, my attorney called before I finished my first cup of coffee. "Graham filed for an emergency injunction," she said. I looked at Atlas sleeping beside my desk. "How emergency? The kind people file when they are panicking, not when they are prepared." "Did it work?" "No." The judge denied it. "Your documentation was too clean. The independent development records, the receipts, the contract review, the timestamps. He couldn't show immediate ownership, and he definitely couldn't show you stole anything." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not relief, exactly. More like a locked door, finally clicking shut behind me. By noon, the rumors had reached the industry blogs. Ellis Biovance funding deal in trouble. Questions surround leadership after failed demonstration. Sources say strategic innovation director removed from role. Their stock dropped 15% before the closing bell. Board members flew in for an emergency meeting. Graham stopped calling me directly and started speaking through attorneys. That was when I knew he was scared. Blair's name disappeared from the company website by evening. No announcement, no apology, just a quiet deletion. The same way she had tried to delete me from my own work, only this time, everyone noticed. Blair showed up at my lab just after 7 that evening. The security camera caught her standing outside the entrance with her arms wrapped around herself. Nothing like the woman who had walked into that boardroom in a white suit and stolen the air from my lungs. Her hair was pulled back badly. Her makeup had worn thin. Her coat was wrinkled, like she had been sitting in a car for hours deciding whether to come inside. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her in. She stepped into the lab and looked around at the rented benches, second-hand equipment, labeled sample trays, and whiteboards covered in formulas written by people who actually understood them. "This is it?" she asked. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "This is what destroyed us." I kept my hands in my pockets. "You destroyed yourselves. I just refused to go down with you." Her mouth tightened. "I didn't steal from you, no. I adapted your work. I improved the presentation. You had the science, Evan, but you didn't know how to make people care. That's the difference between us," I said. "You thought the presentation was the work." She looked away. For the first time, I saw what was underneath all that polish. Fear. Not guilt, exactly. Fear of being exposed as ordinary. "My father won't speak to me," she said. "The board removed me this morning. You wanted credit without the hours." Her eyes flashed. "You think I don't know that now?" "No," I said. "I think you're only sorry it failed." That landed. She looked around the lab again, quieter this time. "How did you know I walked to my desk and picked up one of my duplicate notebooks?" "You studied my notes," I said. "I studied your habits." Blair swallowed. "The investors are with you now, aren't they?" "Yes. And even with me gone, they won't go back to my father. Trust doesn't grow back overnight." She stood there a moment longer, then nodded, like she had finally received the answer she came for. At the door, she turned. "You planned all of this?" "No," I said. "I created options while you and Graham burned yours." She left without another word. 48 hours after Blair walked into that boardroom and pushed my work off the screen, the entire shape of my life had changed. Ellis Biovance was in freefall. Not the kind of dramatic collapse people imagine, with shouting executives and breaking news alerts every 5 minutes. The real kind was quieter and uglier. Calls not returned, meetings postponed, lawyers copied on emails where they had never been copied before, senior staff suddenly unavailable because they were speaking to recruiters or attorneys or both. Maya sent updates from people still inside. Graham had locked himself in his office with the board for 3 hours. Blair had been escorted out through the side entrance. The communications team had drafted 3 different statements and released none of them because every version created more questions than it answered. Meanwhile, I was standing in a lab that still smelled like fresh paint and old equipment, reviewing test conditions with Maya like the world had not just cracked open under my feet. That was the strangest part. Revenge, if you want to call it that, didn't feel like fire, it felt like work. Labeling samples, checking calibration, answering attorney emails, making sure the science stayed clean, while everyone else drowned in panic. At 6:14 p.m., Marcus Harlan called. I stepped into the hallway before answering. "Evan," he said, "the investment committee finalized its decision." I didn't speak. "We're prepared to lead an initial $60 million round into Northline Therapeutics, with performance-based additions that can bring the total commitment to $100 million. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I had imagined that number in spreadsheets. I had modeled what it could do, how many trials it could fund, how many scientists I could hire, how quickly we could move from platform validation to preclinical work, but hearing it said out loud made the hallway tilt slightly. "Those terms will need review," I said, because my attorney would have killed me if I said anything else first. Marcus laughed quietly. "That's the correct answer." Then his voice changed. "There's something else. What Graham Ellis is being removed as CEO." I looked through the lab window at Maya adjusting a microscope, her face focused, steady, unafraid. "The board lost confidence," Marcus continued, "between the failed demonstration, the injunction denial, Blair's involvement, and the documentation you provided. They can't keep him in place. I see. They asked whether you would consider stepping in, interim CEO, stabilize the company, preserve what's left, for the first time in 2 days. I actually laughed, not cruelly, not loudly, just once, because the idea was so perfectly absurd. "No," I assumed that would be your answer. "I'm not interested in sitting in Graham's chair. It's a powerful chair. It's in a burning building." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Fair enough." I looked back at the lab, at the second-hand centrifuge, at the whiteboards, at Maya, who had left a secure job because she believed the work mattered more than the building around it. "I'm building something of my own," I said. After we hung up, I stayed in the hallway for a minute with the phone in my hand. 3 years ago, I would have thought winning meant being invited into rooms like Graham's office. Now, I understood better. Winning was not taking his place. Winning was realizing I had outgrown the room entirely. The courier arrived the next morning, while I was packing equipment receipts into a folder for my attorney. No company logo on the envelope, no return address, just my name, printed on a white label, and a signature line where my hand looked steadier than I felt. Inside was my original lab notebook. For a moment, I didn't move. I knew every scar on that cover. The coffee stain near the spine, the corner Atlas had chewed when he was still young enough to think everything in my apartment belonged to him. The strip of blue tape across the front where I had written "Board Stabilization Trials" in black marker. It had vanished from my workstation months earlier. Now it sat on my kitchen table like a body returned after the funeral. A note was tucked between the first pages. Graham's handwriting was sharp, expensive, controlled. "You won. Was it worth it?" I read it twice. Then I closed the notebook. That was the thing men like Graham never understood. They thought every fight was about beating them. Their ego was so large, it became the whole map. If they lost money, they assumed you wanted money. If they lost status, they assumed you wanted their chair. If they were humiliated, they assumed humiliation had been the point. But I hadn't wanted Graham's life. I had wanted mine back. I wanted the work to survive. I wanted my name attached to what my hands had built. I wanted to walk into a lab without wondering which friendly question was actually a trap. I wanted young scientists like Maya to stop learning that silence was the price of keeping a job. Was it worth it? I carried the notebook to Northline that afternoon. The expanded lab still wasn't impressive by Ellis Biovant's standards. Half the benches were rented. 2 monitors had scratches across the frames. The coffee machine sounded like it was losing a fight every time someone used it. But the place was ours. Maya was already there, with 2 new scientists. Both bent over a setup checklist near the stability chamber. Someone had written day 1 on the whiteboard, then underlined it 3 times. When I walked in, they looked up, not with pity, not with suspicion, not with the polite discomfort people show when they think your career just ended. With respect, real respect, the kind nobody can hand you as a favor, and nobody can take from you with a slide deck. I set the old notebook on the center bench. "This is where it started," I said. Maya smiled. "Then let's make sure this isn't where it ends." I looked around the room at the scratched equipment, the fresh labels, the tired faces, the impossible amount of work waiting for us. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest felt like responsibility instead of fear. Ready to change the world? I asked. Their smiles answered before anyone spoke. So yes, Graham, it was worth it. If this story hit home for you, hit like, subscribe for more stories of justice served. And tell me in the comments if someone ever tried to take credit for your work. I read every one. This story is for entertainment purposes only. Don't copy any actions shown here without proper legal or professional advice.